The restaurant was buzzing with life, as it always was on Friday evenings. The lights were warm, casting a golden glow over the wooden tables, and the clinking of glasses mixed with the low hum of conversation. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, balancing plates of food, taking orders, and making small talk. Her smile was constant, even though the weight of exhaustion pressed on her shoulders. She had been working at this restaurant for a few years now, and though the pay was small, she liked the rhythm of the place, the movement, and the small moments of connection with guests. Tonight, however, felt different. There was a group of guests at a corner table, people who seemed important and expected special treatment. Their laughter was loud, and their voices carried across the room. She approached them carefully, ready to take their orders with her usual politeness. The man at the head of the table waved her over impatiently, and she forced a cheerful greeting, feeling her stomach tighten. "Finally." "Took you long enough," the man said, his tone sharp and mocking. The others laughed, a sound that made her cheeks burn. She nodded quickly, apologized for the wait, and started to take their order. Her hands shook slightly as she wrote down their requests. One of the women at the table leaned forward and whispered, something that made the man snicker. She tried to keep her composure. She had faced rude customers before, but there was something about this group that made her feel exposed and small. She moved as quickly as she could, delivering their appetizers and drinks with a polite smile, though inside, frustration and embarrassment churned. A small accident happened when she tripped slightly on the corner of the carpet, spilling a little sauce onto the table. It was not a big spill, just a drop or two, but it was enough. The man at the table laughed loudly. "Really? Are you even trained for this job?" he said. The others joined in, their laughter cutting and cruel. Her face turned red. She apologized over and over, but their laughter did not stop. It was not just about the spill. It was about making her feel small, about proving that she was less than them. She felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had learned long ago that showing emotion in moments like this only made things worse, that the rest of the evening passed in a blur. Every mistake felt magnified. Every glance from the group seemed like judgment. The other staff tried to reassure her, offering kind words or a small smile, but the shame stuck. By the time her shift ended, her uniform felt heavy and uncomfortable, almost like a weight of her own humiliation. She collected her things silently, avoiding the gaze of the group as she left the busy floor behind. Once she stepped into the quiet storage room to gather herself, she took a deep breath. The hum of the restaurant faded behind her, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat. She leaned against the wall for a moment, closing her eyes and imagining a different place, a place where her mistakes didn't define her, where people didn't laugh at her struggles, where she could be herself without fear. It was a mental escape she practiced often, but tonight it felt especially necessary. Her footsteps carried her down a narrow hallway to a small, often overlooked corner of the restaurant, where an old piano sat. The piano was dusty and rarely played, usually only when the manager wanted soft background music. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling their cool surface and listening to the quiet echo of sound. It was a comfort she had carried with her for as long as she could remember. Music had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could express herself without fear, where every note was hers and hers alone. She had learned to play as a child, spending countless hours at home, practicing simple melodies, then moving on to more complex compositions. She had never pursued a professional career. Life had demanded practicality and stability, not art, yet the piano remained a constant, a quiet companion through her struggles, a hidden world where she could transform her pain into beauty. Tonight, she let her emotions pour out through the keys. Her fingers moved quickly, almost automatically, as if the music itself had taken over. Each note was filled with frustration, embarrassment, and a deep longing to be seen for who she really was. The music was powerful, carrying a mixture of sorrow and strength, and it resonated through the empty corner of the restaurant. She closed her eyes, losing herself in the rhythm, the melody, and the emotion that poured from her heart. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours' time, had no meaning here. Her mind drifted to the events of the evening, replaying the laughter, the mocking voices, and the sting of humiliation. Yet, as she played, those memories transformed. The laughter became part of the music, a sharp note that contrasted with the softer, more tender tones of her melody. The embarrassment became a driving force, giving energy to her performance, creating tension and release with every chord. She had never felt more alive, more present, or more herself. Occasionally, the manager or a late guest would peek around the corner, surprised by the unexpected sound. But she barely noticed. She was lost in a world of her own making, a world where the judgment of others could not touch her. The music told a story that words could not capture, the story of her struggles, her resilience, and her hidden brilliance. When she finally stopped, the silence that followed was almost as powerful as the music itself. Her breathing was heavy, her fingers tingling from the rapid movement over the keys. She leaned back slightly, closing her eyes, feeling the calm that followed the storm of her performance. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel proud, to acknowledge that she had created something beautiful despite the cruelty and challenges of the evening. As she left the piano corner, she knew that her life at the restaurant would continue to be difficult, that there would be more mocking guests, more stressful nights. But she also knew that there was a part of her that could not be touched by their judgment. She carried that music within her, a private strength that gave her courage and hope. Walking home later that night, she reflected on the contrast between her two worlds. In one, she was a server, often humiliated and unseen. In the other, she was a pianist, a creator, a woman capable of producing something extraordinary. The dichotomy was strange but comforting. She realized that her value was not measured by the opinions of others, but by her own abilities, her resilience, and the quiet strength she nurtured every day. The night air was cool, brushing against her face as she walked the familiar streets. Lights from small shops and houses glimmered, but they did not distract her from the thoughts and music still echoing in her mind. She imagined a future where she could play for audiences who appreciated her talent, where her music could inspire others, and perhaps even change her life. By the time she reached her small apartment, exhaustion had settled into her bones, but so had a sense of determination. She sat at her own old piano, one that had traveled with her from childhood, and played a few more notes, letting the music soothe her mind and heart. The events of the evening were still there, lingering, but they no longer held the same power over her. She had transformed her shame into something beautiful, and that realization brought a quiet smile to her face. As she prepared for bed, she allowed herself to dream, not of revenge or recognition, but of the music itself, the joy it brought, and the person she was becoming. She knew the world might never see this side of her, but that did not matter. What mattered was that she had discovered, even in a moment of humiliation, a source of strength, talent, and inner peace that no one could take away. Her story had only begun. The piano had given her a voice that words could not express, a power that even those who mocked her could not diminish. She fell asleep that night with the music still in her mind, a gentle promise that the world would one day hear her in a way that mattered. And with that thought, the first chapter of her journey from shame to recognition quietly unfolded, unseen by anyone, but deeply felt by her. The next morning, she woke up with the memory of last night still vivid in her mind. The humiliation at work clung to her, but so did the sense of power she felt while playing the piano. That contrast stayed with her like a quiet hum in the background, a reminder that there was more to her than the world around her had ever seen. She made a simple breakfast, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She thought about the old piano in the corner of the restaurant, about the melodies that had poured out of her fingers like water, and about the feeling of freedom it gave her. The restaurant was already busy when she arrived for her morning shift. The smell of freshly baked bread and brewed coffee filled the air, but she felt a heaviness as she tied her apron. She greeted her coworkers quietly, nodding and smiling faintly. They had noticed her mood from the night before, some offering small words of encouragement, others remaining silent. She appreciated their concern, though she didn't want to speak much about what had happened. It was a private wound, one she needed to process herself. As the day passed, she moved between tables with her usual care. Her hands were steady, her smile calm, but her mind wandered constantly back to the piano. She remembered the sound, the rhythm, the way the music seemed to lift her above the world for a few minutes. It had been years since she had felt such a complete connection to herself. She wished she could carry that feeling with her throughout the day, but reality kept tugging her back. During a slow moment in the afternoon, she found herself drawn to the piano again. The restaurant was quiet, the lunch rush over, and the staff taking a brief pause. She approached the piano cautiously, brushing the dust off the keys. Her fingers hovered above them for a moment, remembering the complex piece she had improvised the night before. She closed her eyes and began to play a soft melody, letting the notes fill the room. It was different in the daylight, softer, gentler, but still full of the emotion she carried inside. She played for a long while, losing herself in the music. Each note told a story she could not say in words, a story of frustration, hope, and quiet determination. The restaurant seemed to disappear around her. She could hear the faint sounds of dishes being washed and chairs moving, but it was like a background hum compared to the music she created. Time felt different here. It was slower, more meaningful. A few staff members walked past, pausing briefly to listen. Some smiled quietly, impressed by her talent, while others shook their heads in disbelief, not expecting such skill from someone who spent most of her time serving tables. She did not mind. She was not playing for them. She was playing for herself. Each chord, each movement of her hands, was a declaration of her identity beyond the apron and the serving tray. When the manager walked in, he froze for a moment at the sound of the piano. His eyes widened, and he leaned against the doorframe, watching her with a mix of surprise and curiosity. He had known she could play a little, but this was different. The music was rich, complex, and full of feeling. He waited until she finished the piece, the final note lingering in the air, and then he clapped softly, careful not to startle her. She turned, slightly embarrassed, and offered a shy smile. "I just needed to play for a moment," she said quietly. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You should play for the weekend event," he said. "We could use some live music. Guests love that." She hesitated, unsure if she wanted to perform in front of a crowd, especially after last night. The thought of being seen again, this time voluntarily, made her stomach tighten. But there was something in his tone that made her pause. He wasn't asking as a favor. He was offering her a chance to share her talent. She nodded slowly, still unsure, but willing to try. The next few days were a mix of preparation and nerves. She practiced on the piano in her small apartment, refining the piece she had improvised. Each time she played, the melody became stronger, more confident, more expressive. She lost track of hours, absorbed in the rhythm and harmony, shaping the music with her emotions. The frustration of the restaurant, the mockery from the guests, and the quiet sadness of her daily life all flowed into her fingers. Becoming something beautiful and powerful. She also thought about the performance itself. What if she failed? What if people laughed or mocked her? just like before. The fear gnawed at her, but she decided she would not let it control her. This time, she would play not to impress or avoid shame, but because she needed to express herself. The music was hers, and no one could take that away. When the day of the weekend event arrived, the restaurant was busier than usual. Guests had been invited to enjoy an evening with live music, and there was a sense of excitement in the air. She arrived early, wearing a simple dress instead of her uniform, and approached the piano. It seemed larger, more imposing, now that she was to perform in front of others. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, taking a deep breath, feeling the familiar comfort of the instrument beneath her hands. The restaurant gradually filled with people. Conversations and laughter created a lively background, but her focus was on the piano. She could feel her heart racing, a mixture of fear and anticipation. She reminded herself to breathe, to center herself in the music, to let the melody guide her. Finally, the manager gave a small signal, and the room quieted down. She took her seat at the piano, her hands hovering above the keys. A few familiar faces from the restaurant noticed her and smiled encouragingly, but she barely saw them. She closed her eyes and began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, like a whisper. She felt the melody flowing through her, each chord telling a piece of her story. The music grew stronger, more confident, as she let herself move with it. The notes rose and fell like waves, carrying emotion and depth that words could never capture. Guests turned in their seats, listening intently, some leaning forward. Captivated by the unexpected beauty, she played with her whole being, channeling every feeling, every memory, every small humiliation and triumph into the music. Her fingers moved with a precision and grace that stunned even herself. It was as if she had tapped into a part of her soul that had been waiting for this moment, a part that knew exactly how to speak when words failed. The audience was silent, mesmerized. Conversations had stopped, laughter was gone, and the restaurant was filled only with the sound of her music. Even the staff paused their work, standing quietly at the edges, watching in awe. The same guests who had mocked her earlier were present, their expressions shifting from surprise to wonder, their previous judgment fading as they listened. The piece built slowly, with moments of intensity and calm, of tension and release. She lost herself completely, feeling the music flow through her like a river. The fear that had haunted her moments before vanished, replaced by a sense of power and clarity. She was no longer the server who had been shamed. She was a musician, an artist, a woman sharing her truth. When the final note lingered in the air and slowly faded, the room stayed quiet for a heartbeat, suspended in disbelief. Then, slowly, applause began to fill the space, growing louder and louder until the entire restaurant erupted in clapping and cheering. People were standing, smiling, and some had tears in their eyes. She looked around, astonished, her own eyes wide as she realized the impact of what she had just shared. The manager approached, his face beaming. "That was incredible," he said. "You have to do this more often. People need to hear you." She nodded, still processing the moment. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, appreciated, and valued. Her heart was full, not just from the applause, but from the knowledge that she had shared something real, something that belonged entirely to her. That night, after the event, she returned home with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She played one last piece on her own piano, letting the music carry away the tension and fill her with calm. She realized that this was only the beginning. The world might not know her yet, but she had discovered the power of her own voice, the beauty of her own talent, and the strength that came from embracing herself fully. And with that realization, she knew that her journey was just beginning, a journey that would take her far beyond the restaurant and the shadows of yesterday. The following week, the restaurant was abuzz with anticipation. The story of the previous weekend's performance had traveled quickly, shared by guests and staff alike. People were curious, excited to see the server who had surprised everyone with her music. She arrived for her shift early, carrying a mixture of nervousness and quiet determination. Her uniform felt different somehow. She wore it with more confidence, aware that she had something unique that no one could take away from her. The staff whispered among themselves, congratulating her in subtle ways, offering smiles and encouraging words. Even the manager seemed more attentive, checking in to make sure she had everything she needed for the evening. She appreciated their support, but focused on the piano, her safe space in the middle of a busy world. The old instrument in the corner of the restaurant seemed to call to her, and she felt a sense of calm when she approached it. Guests began to arrive earlier than expected, drawn in by the word of mouth. The restaurant quickly filled with chatter and laughter, the smell of fresh food mingling with the excitement in the air. She walked among the tables, taking orders, delivering drinks, and occasionally stealing a glance at the piano, feeling the anticipation build in her chest. Today, she wasn't just playing for herself. She was playing for everyone, and the thought made her pulse quicken as the evening progressed. The restaurant became louder, more vibrant. Conversations overlapped, glasses clinked, and plates moved across tables. She felt the familiar tension of the rush, but also the underlying thrill that came with performing. She knew that soon all of this would fade into the background as the music took over. The manager approached her quietly. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're going to be amazing. Just play from your heart." She smiled faintly, grateful for his words. He signaled the start of the performance, and gradually the room began to quiet. Guests shifted in their seats, sensing that something special was about to happen. She took her place at the piano, sitting with her back straight and her hands hovering above the keys. The familiar weight of anticipation pressed gently on her shoulders, but she welcomed it. The first notes flowed softly, like a whisper through the restaurant. She felt the music in her chest, letting it rise naturally from her fingers. Every sound carried emotion, every chord a story. She remembered the hardships, the moments of embarrassment, and the nights spent practicing in solitude. All of it was part of the music, giving it depth and meaning. People turned their attention to her, the chatter fading as the notes filled the room. Some guests leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected skill and grace of the server who had previously moved among them unnoticed. The music was different this time. It was deliberate, refined, and confident. She had worked on her piece for the past week, shaping it, perfecting it, and infusing it with her soul. The melody swelled, building in intensity. Her fingers moved with precision, each key pressed with purpose. The notes rose and fell, creating a rhythm that echoed through the hearts of everyone listening. She could see expressions of wonder and awe, smiles that lit up faces, and eyes glistening with admiration. Some of the regulars who had doubted her now looked on in quiet disbelief, realizing they had underestimated the quiet server who had always kept to herself. The piece shifted, moving into a softer, more tender section. She let her emotions flow freely, imagining the moments of shame she had endured, transforming them into beauty. The music became a conversation, a way of telling the story she had not yet spoken aloud. Each note was honest, vulnerable, and powerful. She lost herself in the rhythm, allowing the piano to carry her through every memory, every feeling, and every thought as the music filled the restaurant. A few staff members gathered nearby, watching in awe. They had seen her perform before, but tonight there was something extraordinary. The emotion in her playing was palpable, reaching beyond skill to something deeper, something profoundly human. It was not just a performance. It was an expression of her life, her struggles, and her triumphs. The guests were silent, captivated by the story unfolding through sound. Even those who had mocked her before were unable to contain their amazement. Their laughter, their judgment, seemed insignificant in the face of such talent. She noticed them, but instead of fear or shame, she felt a quiet strength. The music was hers, and it could not be taken away by anyone's opinion. The piece continued to evolve, transitioning seamlessly between fast, energetic passages and slow, reflective moments. Her fingers moved with confidence, gliding over the keys, each movement deliberate yet effortless. She could feel the room responding, the collective breath of the audience shifting with every chord. The music had a life of its own, growing and changing, just as she had grown and changed over the past months. As she approached the climax of the piece, she poured everything into the performance, her fears, her hopes, her dreams, and her memories. The notes soared, echoing against the walls and into the hearts of everyone present. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of awe, admiration, and the quiet reverence of people witnessing something extraordinary. She played with abandon, letting the music express what words never could. The final notes lingered, vibrating in the air long after her fingers had left the keys. For a moment, there was silence, a collective pause, as the room absorbed what had just happened. Then, as if released from a spell, the audience erupted into applause. It started softly, then grew louder and louder, until the entire restaurant was clapping, cheering, and whistling. People stood, some moved to tears, others clapping with wide smiles, unable to hide their amazement. She looked around, feeling a rush of emotion she could hardly contain. The room was full of people who had witnessed her transformation from a shy server into a musician whose talent demanded recognition. The manager approached, his face glowing with pride. "That was incredible," he said. "You have to keep playing. People need to hear this." She nodded, still catching her breath, feeling the mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. This was the moment she had imagined countless times while practicing alone, but the reality was far more powerful than she had anticipated. She had shared her story through music, and the response was overwhelming. It was a reminder that the world could see her in a new light, that talent and perseverance could shine even in the most unexpected places. Later, after the applause had died down and the restaurant returned to its normal rhythm, she sat quietly at the piano, reflecting on the experience. She realized that this was more than a single performance. It was a turning point. She had proven to herself, more than anyone else, that she could overcome shame, fear, and doubt. She had transformed her vulnerability into strength, and in doing so, had inspired everyone who had been fortunate enough to witness it. She also understood that this was only the beginning. There would be more performances, more opportunities to share her gift, and more challenges to face. But now, she had a newfound confidence, a quiet assurance that she could navigate the world with her music as her voice. She left the restaurant that night with a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and a belief in her own power that she had never felt before. Walking home under the dim streetlights, she carried the echoes of the piano with her, the energy of the audience still buzzing in her mind. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the humiliation, the practice, the quiet moments of self-reflection, and realized that every step, no matter how difficult, had led her to this moment. She felt a deep gratitude for her own perseverance, for the music that had been her companion through every trial, and for the courage to finally let the world see her true self. That night, she returned to her small apartment and sat at her own piano once more. She played a new melody, softer, more intimate, reflecting on the day and the path ahead. Each note was a reminder that her story was still unfolding, that there were more moments to come, and that her music could continue to touch hearts in ways she had never imagined. She allowed herself a small smile, knowing that she had taken the first steps toward a life where her talent and her voice could no longer be ignored. A life where she could be truly seen, heard, and valued. The following weekend arrived, and the restaurant had become a center of excitement and curiosity. Word had spread far and wide about the server, who could play the piano in a way that left people spellbound. Guests arrived earlier than expected, some just to witness her talent, while regular patrons were eager to see her perform again. She felt a mixture of pride and nerves as she prepared for her shift. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation of sharing her music once more. The restaurant buzzed with activity, servers moving quickly between tables, guests laughing and chatting, the aroma of fresh food filling every corner. She moved through the crowd, taking orders and greeting familiar faces with her gentle smile. Inside, her mind was focused on the piano. She knew that tonight would be different. She had learned from past performances, and she was determined to let the music flow naturally, letting each note convey what she could not put into words. When the time for her performance arrived, the restaurant quieted down. She approached the piano, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys. The instrument had an old charm, slightly worn from years of use, but it felt like an extension of herself. She sat, closed her eyes for a moment, and took a deep breath, feeling the connection between her emotions and the music she was about to create. The first notes began softly, gentle and reflective, drawing the audience into a world of sound that was both familiar and new. Her fingers danced over the keys, moving with precision and grace. The music was expressive, capturing joy, sorrow, longing, and hope in every note. The guests leaned in, some holding their breath, captivated by the unexpected beauty unfolding before them. She remembered the moments of shame she had endured at work, the mocking voices, the embarrassment that had once weighed heavily on her. Now, she transformed those experiences into art, channeling every emotion into the melody. The piano became her voice, speaking in ways words never could. Each chord was deliberate, each pause meaningful, carrying the weight of her journey and the resilience she had cultivated. The audience was mesmerized. Conversation ceased, and even the kitchen staff paused their work to listen. Eyes were wide with awe, mouths slightly open in surprise. Some guests exchanged glances, unable to believe that the shy, quiet server who had always moved unobtrusively among them could create such profound music. There was a sense of reverence in the room, a collective acknowledgement of her talent as the performance continued. The music grew more dynamic, flowing through a range of emotions and tempos. Moments of soft introspection gave way to powerful crescendos, each transition carefully shaped to capture the attention and hearts of the audience. Her fingers flew across the keys, executing difficult passages with skill and confidence. The music told a story of struggle, perseverance, and triumph, revealing the depth of her character and the strength of her spirit. The guests were silent, their attention fully absorbed by the performance. She could sense their emotions, feel their connection to the music, and it fueled her even more. She played with abandon, letting every feeling guide her hands. The piano resonated with the power of her experience, the hardships and joys she had carried for years, and the room was transformed into a space where music bridged the gap between performer and listener. Among the crowd were some who had previously mocked or doubted her. Their expressions were now ones of awe and respect. The laughter and judgment that had once stung so sharply had no place here. The music spoke louder than any words, demonstrating her skill, passion, and humanity. They were witnessing a transformation, a revelation of hidden talent that could not be ignored or diminished. The piece moved into a section that was soft, delicate, and hauntingly beautiful. She allowed herself to feel every emotion, every memory, letting them flow freely through her playing. The notes lingered, carrying the weight of her experiences, and the audience was deeply moved. Some leaned closer to hear every nuance, while others closed their eyes, absorbed in the emotional landscape she created. The music was intimate and personal, yet universal in its impact. As the composition reached its peak, the energy in the room was electric. She poured her entire being into the final section, combining technical mastery with emotional depth. Each note was intentional, each chord a reflection of her journey. The audience could feel the passion, the struggle, and the triumph woven into the music. It was a moment of pure connection, where the boundaries between performer and listener disappeared, leaving only the shared experience of beauty and emotion. When the final note faded, a moment of silence followed, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started softly, then grew louder and louder, filling the restaurant with clapping, cheers, and expressions of admiration. Guests stood, some moved to tears, others smiling broadly, unable to hide their amazement. The room was alive with appreciation for the talent and courage she had displayed. She looked around, feeling a rush of emotion herself. This was more than just a performance. It was a testament to her resilience and dedication. The audience had witnessed her transformation, seen her strength, and felt the power of her music. The manager approached, his face glowing with pride. "That was extraordinary," he said. "You have a gift that the world needs to hear. Never stop playing." She nodded, overwhelmed by the experience. For the first time, she felt truly seen and appreciated, not for her role as a server, but for her talent, her heart, and her courage. She had turned her vulnerability into strength, and in doing so, had inspired everyone who had been fortunate enough to witness it. Later, after the restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, she sat quietly at the piano, reflecting on the performance. She realized that this was a pivotal moment in her life. She had faced her fears, embraced her talent, and shared a part of herself that had long been hidden. The applause and admiration were gratifying. But what mattered most was the personal revelation, the understanding that her music had the power to move people, to connect with them on a profound level. Walking home that night, she felt a sense of fulfillment and purpose. The streets were quiet, lit by the gentle glow of streetlights, and she carried the echoes of the piano with her. She thought about the journey that had led her here, the moments of shame, the long hours of practice, and the quiet determination that had kept her going. Each step had been important, shaping her into the person she was becoming. At her small apartment, she sat at her own piano and played once more, letting the music flow freely. She experimented with new melodies, reflecting on the experience and imagining what was possible in the future. The night was filled with sound, emotion, and the promise of new beginnings. She knew that this was only the start of her journey, that there were more performances, more opportunities, and more ways to share her gift with the world. As she finally set her hands down, she felt a quiet sense of contentment. The music had given her confidence, a sense of identity, and the courage to embrace her talent. She had transformed moments of humiliation into triumph, and in doing so, had discovered a strength she had never known she possessed. Her journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face whatever came next, with the piano as her companion and her music as her voice. In the days following her performance, the restaurant seemed to hum with a different energy. Guests who had been present that weekend returned, eager to experience the music again, and new visitors arrived, having heard stories of the shy server who could captivate an audience with her piano playing. Social media buzzed with clips of her performance, shared by patrons who could not keep such talent to themselves. She noticed her phone lighting up with messages, some from strangers expressing admiration, others offering opportunities to play at small events or private gatherings. The attention was overwhelming, but it also filled her with a quiet sense of possibility. She continued her work at the restaurant, moving gracefully among tables, taking orders, and serving food. But now, there was a subtle shift. Guests treated her with a mix of respect and curiosity, recognizing that she was more than a server. Her colleagues, too, looked at her differently, their quiet nods and smiles, acknowledging the newfound recognition she carried. The manager encouraged her, suggesting small ways she could prepare for future performances and helping to create moments where her music could be showcased more often. Despite the attention, she remained humble. She knew that the music itself mattered more than praise or fame. She practiced each day, refining her pieces and experimenting with new melodies, always pushing herself to grow as a pianist. The piano had become her voice, her tool for expression, and she treated it with care and reverence. Each time she played, she felt a mixture of calm and exhilaration, a reminder of the journey that had brought her here. A few days later, she received an invitation to play at a local charity event. It was a small venue, with only a modest audience, but the opportunity excited her. She was nervous, as this would be the first time she performed outside the restaurant, but she felt ready. The invitation was a sign that her talent was being noticed beyond the familiar walls, where she had once felt so small and invisible. She accepted the offer, seeing it as a chance to share her music with a wider audience and to step further into the world. She had long imagined that the day of the charity event arrived, and she prepared carefully, choosing a simple dress and brushing her hair neatly. The venue was small and intimate, filled with a diverse audience. She could see families, couples, and individuals who had come to support the cause, unaware of what awaited them in the music. She felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but she focused on the piano, letting her fingers remember the melodies and the emotions that had carried her through the restaurant performances. When the moment came to begin, she sat at the piano and took a deep breath. The first notes floated softly through the room, delicate and inviting. The audience fell silent, captivated by the unexpected beauty of the music. She played with precision, grace, and emotion, allowing the notes to tell a story that words could not convey. Each melody carried a part of her journey, the challenges, the quiet determination, and the triumphs she had earned through years of practice and resilience. The audience responded with awe and appreciation. Some leaned forward, listening intently, while others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The room was filled with a sense of connection, a shared experience created through the power of her piano playing. It was a different kind of attention than she had received in the restaurant. Here, people came to listen, to feel, and to be moved. And she reveled in it, grateful for the opportunity to share her talent beyond the walls of her workplace. After the performance, she received warm congratulations from the organizers and attendees. Some approached her to thank her for the emotional impact of the music, sharing how her playing had touched them personally. A few asked if she would consider performing at other events, and she felt a mixture of pride and humility. It was clear that her talent was being recognized in ways she had never imagined, and the thought inspired her to continue pursuing her passion with dedication. The experience also gave her a deeper sense of confidence. She realized that her abilities were not defined by the judgment of others, nor limited by the expectations placed upon her in her day-to-day work. She had discovered a voice that could reach people, inspire them, and convey emotions in a powerful, unforgettable way. The transformation from a shy server who had once been humiliated to a respected performer was becoming more real with each performance. Each note played with heart and skill. As word of her talent spread further, she began receiving invitations to play at larger venues, from community centers to small concert halls. While the opportunities were still modest, they represented a significant shift in her life, a chance to step into a world where her music could be appreciated on a broader scale. She approached each opportunity with care, preparing diligently, practicing with focus, and ensuring that every performance reflected her true self and the depth of her emotions. Through it all, she remained grounded. She continued to work at the restaurant, valuing the stability it provided and the connections she had with her colleagues and regular patrons. But the piano had become more than just a hobby. It was a central part of her life, a source of joy, expression, and purpose. She found balance between her responsibilities and her passion, understanding that each day, each practice session, and each performance was a step toward a life she had once only dreamed of. The recognition she received also brought moments of reflection. She thought about the guests who had mocked her, the laughter that had once caused her so much pain. Now she realized those experiences had shaped her, providing the motivation and resilience that had fueled her growth. She did not dwell on resentment. Instead, she transformed those memories into a source of strength, a reminder of how far she had come and how capable she was. She also began mentoring younger musicians, sharing her experiences and encouraging them to pursue their passions despite challenges or doubts. She understood the importance of guidance and support, having benefited from the quiet encouragement of those around her. Through these small acts, she found fulfillment beyond her own performances, helping others find their voices and their courage. The journey was not without its challenges. There were moments of self-doubt, nights when she questioned her abilities, and occasions when she worried about balancing work and performances. Yet, each time she sat at the piano, those worries melted away, replaced by the clarity and focus that came from creating music. The piano had become a refuge, a source of stability and confidence, and she cherished the connection she had with it as her reputation grew. She received letters and messages from people inspired by her story, people who had faced their own hardships and found courage through her music. The realization that her talent could have such a profound impact was both humbling and motivating. She understood that her journey was no longer just about personal expression. It was about sharing hope, strength, and beauty with others. Each note she played was a bridge between her experiences and the emotions of those who listened. Through these experiences, she learned valuable lessons about resilience, humility, and the transformative power of talent and dedication. She discovered that true recognition comes not from seeking approval, but from embracing one's gifts fully and sharing them with sincerity and heart. The applause, admiration, and invitations were affirmations of her journey. But the real reward lay in the music itself, in the ability to move and connect with others. By the end of the week, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She continued to work at the restaurant, play for guests, and practice diligently, always seeking to improve and express herself authentically. She knew that her story was still unfolding, that there were more challenges to face, more stages to play on, and more hearts to touch with her music. Yet she felt ready for whatever lay ahead, armed with her talent, her courage, and the knowledge that she had the power to transform her life through her own determination and passion. In quiet moments, she reflected on how far she had come, from the time she had felt humiliated and unseen to the present, where her music had become a voice that could inspire and uplift. Each step, each challenge, and each performance had contributed to this transformation. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that growth, discovery, and expression were continuous, and that her music would continue to be both a mirror of her experiences and a beacon for others seeking inspiration. Her life had changed, not because of luck or chance, but because she had embraced her talent, worked diligently, and allowed herself to be vulnerable and authentic. The path ahead was filled with promise, and she felt a quiet confidence that she could meet it with grace, skill, and determination. And so she continued, one note at a time, one performance at a time, knowing that her journey was a testament to resilience, talent, and the transformative power of embracing one's true self. The months that followed were transformative. She had grown from the quiet, nervous server who endured humiliation into a confident, admired musician who had begun to carve a place for herself in the wider world. The restaurant remained part of her daily life, but her identity had expanded, embracing the music that had long been hidden within her. Each day was an opportunity to refine her skill, share her gift, and discover new aspects of herself she had never allowed to shine. One evening, the restaurant hosted a special event celebrating local talent. She was asked to perform as the highlight of the evening. The request filled her with a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. This would be the largest audience she had performed for in one space, and the thought of it stirred both excitement and fear. Still, she knew that the music was her language, her voice, and that she could convey emotions that words could not. The night arrived, and the restaurant was brimming with guests, many of whom had heard of her talent through word of mouth. She moved among them briefly, exchanging polite greetings and smiles before making her way to the piano. The instrument stood under the soft spotlight, slightly warm but familiar. She took her seat, closed her eyes, and allowed herself a moment of stillness. Feeling the energy of the room settle around her, the first notes emerged, soft and deliberate, filling the space with warmth and emotion. The audience fell silent, drawn into the story she was telling through music. She played with precision and fluidity, each chord reflecting her journey, the challenges, the moments of shame, the hours of practice, and the quiet triumphs. Every note was an extension of herself, an honest expression of her heart and soul. As the piece unfolded, the music grew in complexity and depth. She moved seamlessly between gentle, reflective passages and bold, energetic sequences that displayed both technical mastery and emotional resonance. Her fingers danced across the keys, guided not just by skill, but by the deep feeling she poured into each note. The audience was captivated, leaning forward, listening with rapt attention, unable to look away from the woman who had once been a humble server yet now commanded the room with her talent. Among the guests were those who had doubted her in the past, who had laughed at her mistakes. Their expressions had shifted from skepticism to admiration, and some even looked ashamed, realizing they had underestimated her. But she paid them no mind. She was focused entirely on the music, on the way it connected her to the audience, and on the power it gave her to express what words could never capture. The melody swelled, reaching heights that stirred emotions in the hearts of the listeners. The room seemed to vibrate with the energy of her playing, a combination of intensity, grace, and heartfelt storytelling. Tears appeared on some faces, smiles on others, and quiet gasps of appreciation floated through the space. Each reaction reinforced the realization that her music had the power to move people, to touch them deeply, and to make them see the beauty of human emotion through sound. She continued, unbroken and fully immersed in her art. The music became a dialogue, a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of those who listened. Memories of past struggles, the mocking voices, the small humiliations, the fear of failure were transformed into something beautiful, something that resonated with everyone present. Each chord was an affirmation, a declaration of her strength, resilience, and authenticity. As the performance neared its conclusion, she played with a sense of freedom and completeness she had never experienced before. The final passage was bold, yet tender, blending technical brilliance with raw emotion. The audience was completely absorbed, and she felt an extraordinary sense of connection. In that moment, it was as though the room and the music were one, and she was fully present in the expression of herself. When the last note lingered in the air and faded into silence, a profound stillness remained. Then the room erupted into applause. The sound was deafening, a wave of appreciation, awe, and respect that washed over her. People stood, clapping, cheering, and some even called out words of admiration. Her heart raced, and tears threatened to spill, but she smiled, filled with a quiet pride and overwhelming gratitude. She had shared something deeply personal, and it had been received with love and respect. The manager approached her, eyes shining. "You were incredible. Truly remarkable. This is just the beginning," he said. She nodded, barely able to find words, feeling the weight of the moment and the journey that had led her here. For the first time, she realized that her talent could open doors, create opportunities, and inspire others in ways she had never imagined. Over the following weeks, invitations continued to arrive. She was asked to perform at local schools, charity events, and even small music festivals. Each opportunity brought a new sense of purpose and excitement. She prepared meticulously, balancing her restaurant work with her musical commitments, always ensuring that her performances were genuine, expressive, and heartfelt. With each stage, she grew more confident, more skilled, and more connected to the music that had always been a part of her. Her story began to inspire others, especially those who faced challenges or felt overlooked. People wrote to her, sharing how her journey encouraged them to pursue their passions, to embrace their talents, and to believe in themselves. The recognition she received was no longer just about her musical skill, but about the courage she had shown in transforming shame into strength, fear into art, and vulnerability into power. Even as she traveled to new venues and met new audiences, she never forgot her roots. The restaurant remained a part of her life, a place where she had learned resilience, humility, and the value of hard work. She continued to serve with care and dedication, understanding that her journey was built upon every experience, both the humbling and the inspiring. The piano had given her a voice, and she used it not only to perform, but to honor the lessons of her past dot. As her reputation grew, she considered ways to expand her impact. She began teaching small groups of aspiring musicians, sharing techniques, encouragement, and stories of her own struggles. She found joy in helping others discover their own voice, in witnessing the spark of talent and confidence ignite in those who once doubted themselves. It was a deeply fulfilling experience, reinforcing her belief in the transformative power of perseverance, dedication, and self-expression. One evening, she received a call from a local arts organization inviting her to perform at a citywide event. The opportunity was a major step forward, a chance to play for a larger audience and to represent her community. She accepted, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. She practiced diligently in the weeks leading up to the event, refining her pieces and preparing emotionally for the performance. She knew that every note would carry the story of her journey and the sea, emotions that had shaped her. The night of the event arrived, and the venue was packed. She stepped onto the stage, greeted by the warm glow of lights and the expectant faces of the audience. She approached the piano, feeling a calm focus wash over her. This was a moment of culmination, a chance to show the world what she could do, not for fame or recognition, but to express her truth and touch hearts through music. The first notes floated into the air, soft and commanding at once. The audience was silent, captivated by the delicate yet powerful melodies. She played with confidence and grace, allowing the music to carry the story of her life, the struggles, the moments of doubt, the perseverance, and the triumphs. Each chord resonated with emotion, creating a connection that transcended words. As the performance continued, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She realized that her journey had led her here, and that every hardship, every moment of shame, had contributed to the depth and richness of her music. The audience responded with wonder, some moved to tears, others clapping softly, and all completely engaged in the experience she created. It was a shared journey, a communion of emotions through the universal language of music. The final notes were powerful and serene, echoing through the venue, leaving a lingering sense of awe and inspiration. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and expressing admiration in a way that felt overwhelming yet beautiful. She smiled, tears welling in her eyes, feeling gratitude for the journey, the music, and the people who had embraced her talent and story. That night, as she returned home, she reflected on her journey. From a young woman humiliated in her workplace to a musician admired by her community, she had grown, transformed, and found her voice. The piano had been her companion, her refuge, and her instrument of expression. She understood that talent alone was not enough. It was perseverance, courage, and the willingness to embrace oneself fully that had carried her forward. She continued to play, to teach, and to share her music, knowing that her story could inspire and uplift others. Her life had changed profoundly, not because of luck, but because she had taken ownership of her gifts and used them to transform her own life and the lives of those around her. She had learned that even in moments of humiliation and doubt, there was potential for beauty, growth, and triumph. As she sat at her piano in the quiet of her apartment, playing a soft, reflective melody, she realized that her journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more performances, and more opportunities to grow. But she was ready. She had discovered the